Hello, everyone. Let's do a little world studies real quick. And this is going to be on material pages 308 to 310. Very few materials as far as pages are concerned, but a lot to go through, and I'll do it as quickly as possible. I want you to read this material. I also want you, at the end of this, to answer the section review questions. Now, when you're answering these, you should be, and if we have a problem with this, I will definitely understand, and we're going to work this out. We're figuring out all of the Google Classroom. I'm old and still learning some of this technology, so bear with me. But when you go to submit an assignment, look to the right. When you click on that assignment, up in the right-hand corner, there should be a little box that says Submit Assignment. And if you will go there, there should be a way to do it via Google Docs, or you can do PDF or any of those things and be able to submit it that way. So keep that in mind, and we'll work on this together, but hopefully that will work. But real quick, page 308, just a couple of things to talk about. One of the cool things that I've been doing over spring break, because you're inside, can't go anywhere, is playing a game of Risk. Now, some of you have played Risk before, some of you have not. Risk used to be a board game when I was a kid, and you got little Roman numerals. And you would put them on this board. It was a map of the world. And it was divided up into different countries, and you had about 4 or 5 different colors, maybe been 6, that came with your Risk set, and you would set up armies all over the world. And then at some point you would roll the die. You would say, I want to, invade Japan into Kamchatka, whatever. And you would roll the dice, and if you won, you got to take one of their army away, and you would do it until the battle was over, and you had eventually depleted their army out of the country. That's what we're going to kind of see in World War I, and it has to do with the Balkans. And the Balkans, there's a lot of stress and a lot of strife in Europe at this time. And so I want to talk about some of that real quick. One of the things that's key to understanding World War I is that nations boast their importance a lot of times by going to war. I'm thankful that we live in a country that doesn't. The United States does not typically just go to war to go to war. We've always gone to war to bail someone out, to help someone, that type of thing. But a lot of nations say, hey, if we attack so-and-so, we'll look bigger and badder in the world's eyes, those type of things. And that's kind of what we were looking at in World War I. There were a lot of rivalries in the past, and different factions were on different sides. And when you read about this under rivalries in your textbook, just understand that if you live in a neighborhood, you may have been buddies with someone for years, but if they start being a bully to you, you're going to team up with other teenagers in your neighborhood to conquer this bully, to shut them up. And that's kind of what happened in World War I. There were a lot of factors that played in this. You will read about Germany's Chancellor Bismarck. He made alliances with several folks. The English tried to stay isolated, and Russia was always trying to get more property in the Balkans. And if you'll remember, we talked about the Balkans. My goodness, until, even after the Soviet Union broke up, the Balkans struggled for their independence. But this was no exception. We talked about the Ottoman Empire. We talked about the Balkans, and you'll read more about that in your book. Some of the things about the world that you'll see under the section that reads Faith in Science and Technology. One of the problems that we had leading up to World War I is men thought that they could solve all the problems of the world. And I don't know if you've watched the news today or this week or last week, but man can't solve all the ills of the world, no matter what we do, no matter what stances we put forward, no matter what we fight. We can't solve all the ills of the world. But man gets it in their mind that they can solve all of the problems. They can do all things, so to speak. One of the things that you'll see that man discovered or put their finger on was the atom. And you'll read about that in your textbook. Also, you'll read about Robert Koch. He discovered the cause of a disease called anthrax, which is something that's been around for a long time. Anthrax would spread from animals to humans, and it could kill you. It was very deadly. Maybe you remember hearing about after the 9/11 attacks, there were anthrax scares. People would put anthrax, it was a white powdery substance, in envelopes. They would mail it to different people, and if you opened this, it became airborne, and if you breathed it in, you could catch anthrax. It was a very, very scary period in our country, just more terrorism. You'll also read about technology. Processing steel became important. And we know in America that was huge because that's when skyscrapers started. But not only producing and processing steel, but also the different chemicals and electricity and infrastructures. And they used a lot of this steel and a lot of this technology to build militaries. And they would build these militaries that were just humongous, that they didn't need. You take a country the size of Germany, you didn't need what they built, but they built it anyway. And we'll see that was one of the things leading up to the war. And then your book talks about militarism and imperialism and the rival alliances. I want you to understand those rival alliances. That's basically the cause of World War One. If I say if I've got your back, somebody does something to you, I've got you covered. I'll go after them. Then that draws me in. And when something happens, I'm obligated to come to your defense. And that's one of the things that happened. There was in 1907, your book says Russia joined the loose confederation with three nations. It was Britain and France, and Russia joined them. It was called the Triple Entente. So you've got Britain and France and Russia. And Russia joined this loose confederation. And we see later on that the Balkans, they were fighting over land. Austria-Hungary, Russia, they were all fighting over the Ottoman Empire was. They were all wanting lands in the Balkans. And the Balkans, even though they got their freedom to some extent, they were a powder keg, and there was always trouble there. In 1912, they did unite. They drove out the Ottoman forces, but then they fought each other for the remaining forces. And it all leads to June the 28th, 1914. And Eli, the guy's name, Archduke Francis Ferdinand. Yes. And he was the heir to the throne. And he was assassinated. And he was assassinated by a Bosnian radical. Now, Bosnia is part of the Balkans. It's Serbia. And after this assassination, there were all kinds of demands made by the Austrian government, and the Serbian government couldn't meet them. Germany jumps in and says, we'll support the Austrians. Russia goes to defend Serbia. And then the kicker was that Germany said, hey, Russia, don't mobilize your troops, and you need to stop within 12 hours. What do you think Russia did? They're like, I don't think so. And so that's basically what kicked off the war. They declared war, and it divided up into two different groups. You've got the Central Powers. Those were Austria-Hungary and Germany and the Ottoman Empire. And then on the flip side, at this point, you've got Russia, Serbia, and France. And they team up and they fight each other. And that is the beginning of World War I. And, of course, we know that other nations were drawn into this. But I hope you will read this section, pages 308 to 310. Answer the 5 questions. Don't do the star question, and submit them on the right there. So if you'll get that done today, and we will progress into the course of the war and talk more about it. Hope you're doing well. Man, I miss each and every one of you, talking to you every day. But we will get through this. It too will pass. Pray, and hopefully the Lord will deliver us from this whole pandemic soon.